Fuck them Cowboys! Yeah! Never lose sight of the magic of this football team. Yeah! Here we go!
I'm all in.
Cowboys fans, it's your host Slater here. If you bleed silver and blue and you want honest talk, no filters, you're in the right place. Leave a comment, like, subscribe, and enjoy the video. Let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys and their defensive coordinator search. I'm looking at the Twitter feed here, and just about 10 to 20 minutes ago, they concluded their interview with Jonathan Gannon. And next up is our guy that a lot of guys are actually growing onto, and I've kind of grown onto it too, Christian Parker, the DB coach out of Philly. So kind of give me your spiel here. Kind of give me, maybe there's some updates out there for the viewers they haven't heard of yet. Let us know where we at with the defensive coordinator search.
So like you've said, we've seen Jonathan Gannon, we've seen Christian Parker. I think there's one more interview tomorrow. And then we're waiting on Jim Leonhard and the Broncos resolution or the end of their season to shake out, whether that's, this week or, in early February after the Super Bowl. But that seems to me to be what it's down to. We're down to that final four. And from what I've seen on Twitter, as I'm sure you have, three of these coaches seem to have pretty good consideration from Dallas Cowboys fan nation, with the exception of Jonathan Gannon. I think due to his reputation. Okay, I'll put it to you like this. Jerry Jones likes guys on the rebound. He likes guys that have recently failed because he thinks they're just really, really charged up to run back into the fire. And that's well and great. And sometimes that works. But sometimes there's a reason that the guy failed, right? And I'm trying not to fall into that pit and just run with the crowd and say, no to Jonathan Gannon. I don't know the guy personally. I don't know him. All I can do is grade what I've seen on games and what's happened in the National Football League. So with that in mind, he didn't have a ton of success with the Cardinals, but he's also acting as a head coach. And there are situations where some guys are just better at being DCs or OCs than they are at being head coaches, so maybe that's what the situation is, but we have no way of knowing that. I do know that he's got relationships with current, people on the staff of the Cowboys, Clayton Adams and he'll spend some time together. I think he's got another connection from earlier in his career as well. So I definitely think there's, sponsorship in the building for him, but Dallas Cowboys as a fan are not really too high on the 43-year-old, former Arizona Cardinals head coach. Going to be an interesting one to see. So he was obviously the Philadelphia Eagles defense coordinator for a couple years when the defense was really good and they went to that Super Bowl. Outside of that, I don't have a whole lot on Jonathan Gannon, just kind of lukewarm.
Yeah, so Jonathan Gannon, for me, and I put this on Twitter today, and he feels like a Matt Eberflus part 2 kind of hire. You're just kind of like head coach that didn't work out. You're going to bring him back and hope that his DC skills are good. Would I have a little bit more hope for Jonathan Gannon than I would Matt Eberflus? Yes, I do believe that Jonathan Gannon would do a better job than Matt Eberflus, but I don't think it'd be by a lot, right? I think Dallas Cowboys fans get tired of being in this cycle of just trying to retread tires. You got bald tires and you're out there with a pocket knife, marking treads back on them, hoping that these tires are going to work. And yes, we've had, situations where it's worked out in the past, right? Dan Quinn, he was a former head coach, got fired. We brought him in as a DC. He works out, and then now he's a head coach again, right? It can work, but I don't have high hopes for it. I would love to try something different, something that's, what other teams do, discover a guy who would be a great DC in the future for another team or a great head coach. I would love to be a team that it's like, hey, under Brian Schottenheimer, if you have an offense or defense coordinator there, they're probably going to end up being a good head coaching candidate in about 2 or 3 years. Watch, right? And have multiple guys come through the building like that, and not, well, we're just trying to pair a bunch of veterans together. Like when you look at people talk about coaching trees, right? That's what I'm relating it to. Like people talk about the Sean McVay.
Yeah, look at the exactly. Look at the coaching tree for Jonathan Gannon and Eberflus, and you don't want history to repeat itself.
Yeah, if you look, and what I'm trying to get at is, if you look under those coaching trees, you're like, oh, if he's under Sean McVay coaching tree, I want him. Or he's under the Shanahan coaching tree, I want him. Or if he's under, that's the kind of culture I would love to develop with Schottenheimer if he's here for the long term. Is that like, well, we have Marty Ball, and then we got Brian Schottenheimer. And if you're under the Schottenheimer, coaching tree, you're probably a really good leader of men. You're a really good head coach, and you're schematically right.
Right.
That's how I want this to go. And the only way you can get there is by hiring a Christian Parker, right? A DB's guy who's going to become a DC and eventually develop into a great head coach. Jim Leonhard can be the same way. Daronte Jones can be the same way. Jonathan Gann just literally feels like me going out to my car. Or, my car doesn't have ball tires right now, but if it did have ball tires, it's me going out there, taking it off, saying, you know what, to pass my inspection, I'm going to pocket knife some lines into my tire, put it back on there, and roll it down the road and hope it doesn't blow a tire.
Yeah, you got 60% more tread now.
Yeah,
I mean, if you look at it from that point of view, like you said, with coaching trees, okay, so let's say Matt Eberflus, right? He was a defensive coordinator, went to be a head coach, didn't have success, dropped back down to a defensive coordinator, didn't have success again, and now he's out, right? If John Gannon is a disciple of his, John Gannon, defensive coordinator, Arizona Cardinals head coach, didn't have success, drops down to DC for the Dallas Cowboys. What do you anticipate is going to happen? If he's Matt Eberflus Jr., he's probably not going to have success again because one, that's the parity of being in the tree. But not only that, the odds are really stacked against you here. You've got a conglomerate of personnel from several different regimes. We need 5 additional starters on this team. Jerry literally broke the team a week before the season started last year. And we've just had a Jerry guy fall flat on his face. And you are 20 years younger than him, and you're coming in to pick up the same torch that he had. It's just, to me, it just does not bode well. I think you need a fresh take on all this. We need to go, not just cast a wide net, but we need to go completely against the grain of what we feel comfortable doing in this situation, because that's what we've done time and time again, and it hasn't worked out right. So I think, like you said, we need some guys to come in and develop under Schotty, whether it's offense or defense, and then they can move on and grow in their career after they've established something here. But, as I look at this, I can't help but think that Jonathan Gannon is not the right fit for this DC spot.
Yeah, like you said, it's a lukewarm kind of. It's kind of like a, here we go again.
Yeah.
Let me ignore the problems and kind of just let it be, and it is what it is. But here's what I'm going to provide. We're going to end up in a Jonathan Gann situation, and Dallas is going to be like, well, we had no other options. We couldn't do nothing else. If we don't decide to kind of start making some move on this DC, because at the end of the day, if you're waiting on Jim Leonhard to get done with the playoffs, it could be one more week, right? But what if Christian Parker gets hired? What if
tell me what you think about Christian Parker? This is our rivals' assistant coach, one of their I think is their passing game coordinator. He's 34 years old. He's pretty young, but from everything he's put into the league so far, he's got a high reputation and he's done really well. So what would you think about somebody like a Christian Parker being considered for this job? Not just considered, but actually put in the position to be the DC.
I think for what Dallas For what Dallas is needing help with on defense, he's a good fit to do it. I almost feel like a Al Harris Jr. kind of vibes with it, right? You look at the DBs he had over there, Quinion Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. He made those guys into all pros. These guys into Pro Bowlers. These guys into making plays in the Super Bowl, getting Philly pretty far, right? Yes, he may not have been to DC, but he is a big part of developing that cornerback room, right? And obviously,
Sure.
Dallas has burnt that relationship with Al Harris. And what better way to maybe go get a similar Al Harris to call your plays or to run your defense than a guy like him? And that's how I feel about him. I think he's, like you said, 34 years old. He's got that young and hungry mentality. I think it would be great to steal somebody from Philly. Philly fans aren't really looking forward to like potentially losing him. People are saying, "Oh, Dallas ain't gonna hire him because he's from Philly or whatever." I'm like, what better way to work? Let me put it this way for you, right?
That's a Super Bowl winning team. That's one of the top defenses in the league. So why not steal from them? Go ahead.
Well, let me put it this way. What defensive coordinator gives Dak Prescott the most trouble that they always talk about? Vic Fangio.
It just happens to be all the ones we're interviewing.
Yeah, well, Vic Fangio is specifically one that they name on national TV broadcast that Dak Prescott always struggles against.
Right.
So why not go hire the guy who knows how to, one, stop your quarterback to help you elevate your offense even more? But second part of that is
if you can stop the likes of Dak Prescott and Matt Stafford, who are kind of like the long tooth, witty, savvy veterans in the league, then you can stop anybody.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, he worked under a guy who knows how to stop our offense. So bring him in, one, to help with your offense, but two, to develop a defense. I think he's somebody that will also be here for 2 or 3 years. Jonathan Gann does a good job for a year. He's gone. I'm not looking for that. I need somebody to stick around Dallas for 2 or 3 years, develop a roster, to build, like you talked about in multiple episodes now, that ability to grow the guys under him. Once he leaves, it's like, hey, we have an internal guy inside the building who can step up and take his job.
Yeah, not only do you want to interview a defensive coordinator candidate, you want to interview who he's going to bring in, who's going to be his assistant, who's going to be his, passing game and his D-line coach, because that is potentially who's going to be your future DC once this guy develops. Because you got to look at this with Christian Parker, okay? He's 34 years old, okay? He's a former wide receiver and cornerback, okay? He coached defensive backs at Virginia State, Norfolk State, Notre Dame, A&M. He became a defensive analyst, went to the Green Bay Packers as a defensive quality coach, went to the Denver Broncos as the defensive back coach from 21 to 23, and is currently the Philadelphia Eagles passing game coordinator and defensive back coach as of 2024. So he is moving very, very fast.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because he's very good and he's developing very quickly. So now is the time to grab a guy like this, because he's going to deliver something new, something innovative, and he's going to have a lot of energy and excitement in the manner that he does it, which is contagious. And that's how you develop the younger guys under you to come up and take your position one day when you move on. So he's literally the definition of what you want in a young DC to come in and change the forecast for your whole side of the football. And I mean, looking at this and just going over my notes here, that's exactly what I think Dallas needs to be looking for, whether it's Christian Parker, Daronte Jones, Jim Leonhard. If that's the way they're going to go, these are the right guys. Let's move on from this retread stuff.
Yeah, and I think what's holding them back is maybe the Jim Leonhard still being in the playoffs and all that. But
Sure.
I just see, when I look at, if we're just talking Daronte,
is he worth waiting on though? How long do you wait? If somebody goes out and hires Daronte Jones tomorrow.
Yeah, I've also heard rumors of, Leonhard wanting to join the Giants as their DC. So it's like, what happens if you lose to Christian Parker and Daronte Jones and all of a sudden
Jim Leonhard goes to the Giants?
Yeah,
and now you're left with Gannon.
Right. Yeah, now you're stuck with Gannon. And that's what I'm fearful is going to happen. And I think when you're looking at it overall, your highest upside, I think, is Christian Parker. I think the most aggressive boomer bust would be a Daronte Jones, and I think your more like safest pick would be like Leonhard, with the connections and all that. But I think the biggest fail of a pick would be Gannon. I think if you were to come out with Gannon, starting off by firing Eberflus early, you already worked ahead, right? I've talked about this before. Dallas has been very proactive in this search, right? They fire Eberflus earlier than I thought they would. Then they start casting this wide net of candidates earlier than I thought they would. Now
Put
they
in
haven't
more
really
candidates than we thought they would,
Yeah.
different candidates than we expected.
but
They've hit everything we've asked them to do.
don't let it all fall apart now because you want to
but don't
wait for
reward
one
us
guy.
by giving us Gannon. At least try something. Yeah.
It's like don't keep in your back pocket like, oh, we've got Gannon no matter what we want to do here, and if everyone else leaves, we still got Gannon. Go get the guy
He's
you
the
want.
only coach I know of, Slater, that's not being asked to be interviewed by anybody else.
Yeah, I like Christian Parker, and I like it because he worked under Vic Fangio. I think that's what's the most attractive to me is that the one defense coordinator when he was at Denver, when he's with Philly, who gives our team the most trouble is Vic Fangio. Take a predecessor, take someone who's worked under him for a year or two and who has developed great cornerbacks. How nice would it be next year at the end of the season, going into playoffs, to be like, DaRon Bland is a all-pro corner again. Yeah. Chavon Ravel is a pro bowler, or, safeties wise, maybe he figures it out. He gets a Caleb Downs in his hands with those two corners. It's like, I would love it. I think it's the best pick.
All right, so let's move on from Christian Parker and let's talk about Daronte Jones. So Daronte Jones is 47 years old. Okay, he played. I think he was a cornerback for a year or so, and then he started coaching in 2001.
Yep.
And see, we've got Nicholas State, safeties coach. He was a defensive coordinator for several years. Then he went on to he coached at Hawaii as a secondary coach. Okay. Moved on to Wisconsin as a defensive back coach. First came in the NFL in 2016 as the Miami Dolphins assistant defensive backs coach. On to Cincinnati as a cornerbacks coach. Up to Minnesota in 2020 as the defensive backs coach. Then he went back down to the NCAA as LSU's defensive coordinator. And then he came back up to Minnesota Vikings in 2022 as their defensive backs coach. Got promoted to defensive passing game coordinator in 2023, which is what he currently is for the team right now. So this guy is another one who has seen a lot of coaching, has been in a lot of places, has a lot of different angles, and he's a protege of one of the best defensive coordinators in the league, in my opinion, up there in Minnesota. So I mean, this one has a lot of potential too. I mean, I like Christian Parker a little bit better, but
he has a large track record of working with DBs too. And I think that's kind of the theme with Dallas is they're trying to target somebody who's worked with a lot of secondary, who is able to I think they know in the front seven, they're going to be all right no matter what happens, but they really need somebody to develop that defensive backfield, especially with it, needing a lot of help. But I like him too. I'm not against him at all. I think him and Christian Parker would be ideally the top two candidates that we've interviewed so far, right? Right. If you start talking the conversations of Flores and Schwartz and McDermott somehow comes in, then we may have some better options. But with the guys we've interviewed in the building, those two guys have been pretty sharp right now. And I think the biggest thing for me is he's got a little bit more experience than Christian Parker, right? So he's kind of been in a lot more locker rooms, NCAA and, NFL. The one thing that it's not really scary or concerns me, he's bounced around a lot. It's kind of like, why he hasn't been able to hold kind of a steady job in the NFL or in NCAA, which I know in NCAA you're trying to get back to the NFL, so you're kind of looking for promotions there. But from what I've known and what I've read about him is, he's obviously well respected. He's got the strong track record with the corners and safeties. And one thing I do like about him too is, from what I understand, is the way that he looks at schemes and all that. He's very aggressive. He likes to, send pressures, heats, and I'm sure that's because he's a secondaries coach and he can tell a defensive coordinator when he even called plays at a time of how to send pressures at the right time. He kind of gives me my gosh, what's the Chiefs defensive coordinator? I'm blanking. It's
Oh gosh, I know who you're talking about.
Chat, if you're here, help me out.
Spagnola?
Is it Steve Spagnuolo or something like
Pretty
that?
sure it is.
Yeah, so he reminds me a lot of some of him, someone that can disguise things really well. But when it's like third and something and the game's on the line, heat's coming, but he disguises it very well to capitalize on getting pressure on the quarterback to potentially have a big time play.
Right. Yeah.
So
I think that's all fair. And I look at it like this. If you're comparing apples to apples between Christian Parker and Daronte Jones, you look at, just to touch on what you said, because it just came to my mind. Yep. Yes, he has bounced around a lot. He's 47 years old, so he's got 13 more years of experience than the other, or 11, 12 years, however many, of the young man Christian Parker. But he's stayed in the game.
Yeah.
So even if he did move on, he moved on and he came back. So he had a short stint, 1 year as LSU's defensive coordinator, which is the only time he's been in that position. Christian Parker hasn't been a defensive coordinator at all. But, it wasn't the most productive season, but he was able to come back into the league in 2022 and come right back into the NFL and be a coach. And now he's had enough success that he's actually being considered a candidate by multiple teams. And that doesn't happen unless you have the know-how and the ability to go with it, because like I've said before, and you've said, these people in this business, they know what they're doing. They know how to look at players. They know how to look at talent. They know how to draft. They know how to evaluate. So, 100 people aren't going to be wrong about someone's ability to, give information and teach people. So, if you look at it by the eyeball test and you just look at Minnesota's passing game and you look at the defense and then you look at Philadelphia's passing game defense, I personally like the way the Eagles' defensive backs play.
Yeah.
A lot better than I think Minnesota's stronger because it's very innovative about how it uses its front five. And I think the Eagles' secondary's defense's strong suit is the way their DBs move around and share responsibility in the backfield back there. So I think that really is, their strength. They have a good defensive line, but man, those DBs get on horses out there and they run everybody down. They rally to the ball and they hit really, really hard. So I like that a little bit more than what I see from the Vikings defense. So It's going to be an interesting battle. Right now, I'm still leaning Christian Parker just because I like the youth aspect of it. And I like that he's been, coming up through the ranks really fast.
Yeah, I agree. I guess let's talk about Jim Leonhard, right? He's the last one we got here.
Yep. So let's see, Jim Leonhard. Let's look at this guy. So hiring a play caller with just 2 seasons at the NFL level is a major risk. Leonhard's experience at the college level was about as high of a grade as it could be, but the ability to show adaptability over time at the NFL level is a different animal. When opposing offensive coordinators get the first 6-game sample size from his scheme and concepts, they will adjust and attack. Is there evidence that he can react to that accordingly? So that's the question that's kind of been thrown out there on Jim Leonhard, who's 43 years old, big at Wisconsin, had some time with the Green Bay Packers, and now he is currently on staff with the Denver Broncos. And this was one of the, standout candidates that came to mind for Dallas. And, that's kind of where we're at on him. Went to college at Wisconsin, was undrafted in the NFL, played free safety for Buffalo, Baltimore, New York, Denver, New Orleans, Buffalo again, and then finally was done in Cleveland. Defensive back coach in Wisconsin, interim head coach at Wisconsin, senior football analyst for Illinois, defensive back coach and pass game coordinator in 2024 in Denver. And then this year, he is the assistant head coach and defensive pass game coordinator.
Yeah, and I think the rule of thumb in the NFL, and I've heard this from other people, is usually when they start adding head coaching titles like assistant to the head coach and all that, it's to kind of get you to stay and kind of help him promote you and all that. But
right
when we're talking about Jim Leonhard, I like him. I think he is a good potential defensive coordinator guy that can walk in the building. I think he's kind of, like I said earlier, the safest of all the picks. I think he provides that kind of like a security blanket. You know, he's kind of got that.
Why do you feel that way?
I feel that way because of his tenure with, where is it from? Nebraska?
As a coach or as a player?
As a coach.
Okay.
I think his long tenure with Wisconsin, as a defensive coordinator there, and then a little bit of interim head coach provides that experience. And the NFL defensive assistant, I think it's been interesting of the way he's been able to help out Sean Payton in those corners. He kind of provides that same thing we were talking about for Christian Parker and Daronte Jones about, being able to elevate DBs to play better.
Sure.
And I think I look at him as more of maybe a teacher, right? I could see him walking into a room and being able to be like a scheme guru, kind of a guy who can organize things, stay calm under the pressure, and kind of adjust to what's going on. But I don't see that the big high. I don't see the upside with him. I don't see the boom with him, right? I kind of just see like you get a top 20 defense scheme wise, and he's able to, create plays or anything like that. Like I see a lot of base defense coming out of him, right? I don't see anything explosive, anything crazy or like when I look at Daronte Jones,
he's just a strong fundamentals coach.
Like strong fundamental kind of guy. That's the vibes I get from reading about him and watching kind of some of the film of when he was at, Wisconsin, and kind of I don't know how much he provides for Denver, obviously, but I can see just a lot of strong fundamentals kind of guy, while Christian Parker and Daronte Jones are going to elevate a lot of like boom in the scheme. Like you're going to see like that like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden Reddy Stewart is playing like a Pro Bowler, right? But I see, well, let me put it this way. Dallas struggled with one-word communications is what we got to. Dallas struggled with, trying to dumb things down. I think Leonhard makes the complicated things look simple, but call it in a complicated way. That makes sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So okay. So let me go through mine real quick.
Yep.
Here's how I've got these 4 guys ranked. I've got Parker, Leonhard, Jones, Gannon, right?
Yep.
And Gannon is only, the house is on fire. We only got one firefighter, and it's Gannon. So we got to put the house.
Not a good firefighter.
Yeah. That's it. That's where we're at. But I like Parker the most. I really like the way the Eagles secondary plays, and I love the fact that he's 30. I know I've said this before. He's 34 years old, and he's moved up through the ranks like that in just some years, small amount of years. That tells me that he's got something. He's got that it factor, and he's a hot hand. And that is a great thing to develop a defensive culture under. I think it's excellent. Strike when the iron's hot. Okay. And the next, Leonhard hits all the boxes. Here's why. These are the things that I think are important. You talked about this earlier. Coaching tree, Sean Payton, check.
Yep.
Long tenured at the NCAA level as a coach, Wisconsin, check. Played in the NFL for more than just a year. He played 4 years. He can play the game. Check. A lot of good coaches and some of the best coaches in the league right now are former players, right? So that checks another box. And then everything that we like about Shoddy is what this guy does. Good leader of men, great educator, great communicator, and he's a big fundamentals guy. But Slater said it. He hit it right on the head, in my opinion. Does he have the ability to be innovative and take an unpopular approach or a dynamic approach to a defensive coordinator's position? Can he do that? And that's what gives him, to me, that gives Parker just a slight edge over Leonhard to me, is because I think Parker is going to bring something innovative to the defensive coordinator position for the Dallas Cowboys with our current, personnel group of defensive backs, where Leonhard would provide you some of that, but it's more going to be, this is how we're going to show up and practice and the attitude, and this is our game plan, and we're going to execute it the same way every day. I'm going to make sure you know what you're doing. I'm going to make sure you know what I want, and then we're just going to repeat. And that's kind of how Sean Payton coaches, and that's how he's going to coach. So could he do it? Yes. Would he have as much success as I think Parker would have? Who knows? But I give Parker the edge just because it's my opinion and I can do that. And then as far as Daronte Jones, I don't think he's a bad choice. I think it may take him a little bit longer to develop. You're going to have to give him some really good assistant coaches to assist him as a defensive coordinator, and that would make him or break him. But I think he's also capable, and I like what he can deliver for a defensive coordinator. But I just see him third in line behind Parker and Leonhard. And then, we've already said how we feel about Gannon.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no need to talk about Gannon. Gannon's like last option. I'm not even want to talk about it because I really don't.
It's only because he's on the list. That's the only reason I'm talking about it. I'd rather he just not have an option.
Yeah. But, yeah, I mean, I like your list. I agree with your top four in that order. I think Jones is kind of like my second choice for the kind of guy I'm looking for because I think Parker and Jones are very similar.
Sure.
Parker is more of the favorite for that kind of scheme I'm looking for. If I'm looking to be safe, Jim Leonhard, right? If I'm looking for someone innovative, start a Schottenheimer coaching tree, I'm bringing Parker in. So
cool.
All right.
That's all I've got.
Yeah, that's all I got too, man.